Good morning. It is Saturday the 15th, morning of Saturday the 15th, and I am in Oamaru on the east coast of the South Island of New Zealand. Okay, so I walked down the hill from Queenstown. By the way, twisted my ankle on the way. So, walked down the hill, went back to my hostel, got on the bike, went up to Glenorchy and the road to paradise. The actual road from Glenorchy to Paradise is boring. It's a straight nothing road that just ends in a gravel road. But the road between Glenorchy and Queenstown is amazing. It's one of the world's best motorcycling roads for sure. Based on traffic, but on the road itself, sort of on the twisty bits and the views from it, it's absolutely magnificent. Did that there and back. On the way back, I got stuck for the last, maybe third of it, behind a truck delivering furniture. And it was a local truck, and it had the double front axles, like double steering axles. And that thing was so fast on the bends that, I could keep up with him, but I could not pass him. There was no opportunity for me to sort of gain speed and, have a big speed advantage over him. After I got back to Queenstown, from Glenorchy, went down to the botanical gardens there and walked around. Went to a place called Taco Medic. There was a craft food truck sort of fish and chips thing and a craft food truck sort of taco thing, and I had the taco thing. And it was very good. I quite liked it. Next morning, had breakfast, got on the bike and headed out to Milford Sound. I stopped in Tianau for a coffee and bought a couple of pies from this local bakery that they had there. The pies are kind of a New Zealand specialty. New Zealand doesn't have that much of its own food. Its culture is so much influenced by the UK, by England, that its own food is kind of crap. I bought a mint and lamb pie and a seafood pie. Got to Milford early enough. Managed to actually fit all my stuff except the helmet in the panniers when I changed it into my street clothes. The top box that they gave me is not big enough for the helmet, so I just strapped the helmet to the back of the bike and left it there, and then went on the cruise. So I had a shared cabin. I shared it with this couple from Australia. We got to go out in tender crafts. There was a choice of kayak or a tender craft, a little power boat. And of course I went into the power boat because I went under a waterfall. There was forests growing vertically on a cliff edge, and there was a waterfall over a 40-meter overhang, at the top of a 700-meter rock, and saw some fish jumping out of the lake. They said that it's because there's dolphins near, but didn't see any dolphins. And the dinner with the cruise was really good. There was a really good chef there, and he cooked up some awesome stuff. The next morning we went out into the Tasman Sea, actually out into the sea between New Zealand and Australia. Well, just a little bit out of the sound. But we got to experience the waves and the stuff, and the scenery and the beauty of it, and it's very, very nice. Got back to harbour, had a cool cruise through the Milford Sound. I got back on the bike and started driving, and the weather forecast was that every bit of the country would get rain except for Fiordland, except for the part that we were at. And as far as Tianau, there was basically no rain. I stopped at the Divide and stopped at a couple of other cool places like the Mirror Lakes. It was quite a long drive, and on the way there I got into some of the worst weather I had on this trip. There was bad gusts of wind, really strong rain. And that was because I was on the south coast as well. I was basically on the southern tip of New Zealand. And got to Invercargill eventually. So the first thing I did was I went to the Bill Richardson Museum. The Bill Richardson Museum is a museum of transport, a museum of old trucks, run by a guy called Bill Richardson. Well, he's the collector. He's some local businessman, some local rich dude, owner of a trucking company. And he's a collector. He's the one who's been collecting these trucks all his life. And so he built this series of sheds into a museum and had all of these trucks restored and displayed there nicely. The collection is pretty cool. The amount of trucks they have there is cool. They have they're restored nicely, but it's really non-interactive. That's what I didn't like about the museum. There's not much to do there, and there isn't really information about the trucks. There's no story. there's no narrative. There's only like, this truck was bought by such and such and used there and there for these and these purposes until I bought it off them, and that's it. So it's not so much a museum of transport as a museum of Bill Richardson. What they don't have is somebody who knows the theory of museum design, who knows how to make a museum interactive and beautiful and interesting for visitors. So they made something that looks like a museum, like they know what a museum is supposed to look like. So they made something that isn't a museum, isn't a good museum, but looks like one. And it's a museum of trucks. So in two completely different ways, it's a cargo cult museum. And then after that I went down to Bluff, which is the last town, even more south than Invercargill, just a tiny little like fishing town and harbour. I went down to Bluff, and I went south of Bluff to Stirling Point, to the place where the road ends. Like, it's not the southernmost point of New Zealand, because that's just like some rock outcrop that you can't get to on the road. And it's not like, there's still Stewart Island and there's a ferry that goes there. But that was where the road ended. So that was as far south as I could possibly ride. And I had a picture there taken that matches very well my picture from Norway, which is as far north as you can ride. On the way back from Bluff, I stopped and had some Bluff oysters. Bluff oysters are this famous like New Zealand food. Right now they're just starting to get in season, so like all the shops are advertising that, oh, we have fresh Bluff oysters, and it's a really big deal for everybody. So I stopped and had some like fresh Bluff oysters, basically like just out of the water. The next morning, left Invercargill along the southern scenic route again, went through the Catlins, through the Catlin Mountains up to Dunedin. And the Catlins were, again, it was a very nice ride. It was wet, it was windy and wet. Oh yeah, I stopped at Curio Bay, which is where you have the petrified forest. There was a storm there and some trees fell down, and there was like a very fast like silting up of the harbor. So the silica sand petrified the trees and impregnated the trees before they could decay. And so the trees turned to stone. That made the trees petrify and like preserved for thousands and thousands of years, A very beautiful, stark, stony harbor, and I was there when there was a lot of weather to go along with it. And then rode on to Dunedin. Dunedin is weird. Dunedin is a piece of Scotland directly transplanted to New Zealand. Like, the places I've been to so far, they've all looked like their own stuff, right? They've all looked like their own places. Like, Auckland is a big city. Wellington is a big city. And actually, I quite like on the North Island that they have a lot of their own architecture. Like, yeah, they've taken a lot of stuff from Europe, like especially from England, like the big buildings, the big imposing government buildings and things like that. But they do have their own architecture. They do have their own like ideas about things and such. Dunedin it was built as Edinburgh in the south, and it really is that. It's really a piece of Scotland in the south. But it was cool. They had a good museum there. I quite enjoyed Dunedin. That was the first place where I wish I had more time to stay. I felt like I didn't do enough stuff there. This is a very quiet, nice morning, but for the last 2 days, like since I left Milford Sound, I've been riding through Cyclone Cook, which is the worst cyclone, they said, worst cyclone to hit New Zealand since 1968. So the worst cyclone for 50 years, and I was just riding through it. Yeah, it was rainy, but it wasn't anything worse, or like considerably worse than what I've ridden through in Estonia and in Norway and such. From Dunedin, it was an hour and a half ride up here to Oamaru. Went down to the harbour, to the steampunk HQ, because Oamaru is a town that was, in the 1880s, it was as big and as important and as rich as Los Angeles was at the time. These days it's a tiny sleepy little town, but they have this like awesome town center. When the first European settlers arrived here, they didn't have wood to build with. There weren't any accessible forests like close to this harbor, but there was a lot of relatively soft stone here, like local stone. So they just started building these awesome Victorian buildings out of this stone, and they have this awesome town center with like Victorian buildings and things. And one of them is the Steampunk HQ. So basically I found it on Atlas Obscura, and that's why I put Oamaru on my list of things to do. Places to stop at. It's cool. Don't make it your primary destination. It was a cool thing. There's enough stuff to do in Oamaru as well. I'm not sorry I stopped here, but it's kind of smallish. and it's a museum of like steampunk sculptures and things. Walked around the city for a while, went to the end of the beach, where there is the blue penguin colony, and at sunset you can go in there and watch the blue penguins return from a day of fishing and waddle out onto the beach. It was really cool. There's New Zealand fur seals there as well. And then just came back here sometime after sundown. Had a beer at Scott's Brewery down there by the harbour. Came back here and fell asleep, basically just blacked out. So today is my last day on my motorbike. Today I'm having breakfast here, and then I'm going up to Christchurch, which is like a 3-hour trip. Normally it'll be a 4-hour trip for me because I'm taking inland scenic route. In Christchurch I have 2 options for the evening. I can either go to Willowbrook Natural Reserve, which is where they have like animals and kiwis and things like that, and a cool Maori cultural performance. I do that. The other option is I can go to the peninsula next to Christchurch, where they have like a mountain and stuff like that. And then tomorrow morning, Sunday morning, 9 a.m, I'm giving the bike back. Monday early morning, I am flying to Japan. Cool.